Hello and welcome to the Captain's Table, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Paul Berserker01 Batman Shelley, your humble host and space bartender here at the AstroPub and your facilitator on the Captain's Table. The Captain's Table is a podcast, talk show thing that I do live on Twitch, twitch.tv/TheAstroPub every Saturday at 6 p.m. Eastern, where I bring people from all over the Star Citizen universe to talk about various topics. Sometimes we just talk about the news. Sometimes we talk about very specific topics. Today is a very specific topic day. But before we get into that, let's introduce the cast members for today, starting with AttiraKell. Who are you? What do you do in Star Citizen, and where can they find you?
Hey, I'm AttiraKell, and member of an organization called Ammo. You can look us up. It's a good time. You can find me at YouTube/AttiraKell, all one word. And what I focus on within the YouTube videos is a soldier's opinion, which is a long form videos that discuss specific niche topics within the military community. Or a military profession, as we would call it. So artillery, reconnaissance, armor, logistics, things like that. And then I break that down both historically and where we've been all the way through present, and then into Star Citizen and how they can kind of tweak or adjust or create new things to replicate that.
Nice. That's very, very poignant for the topics we'll be talking about today. part of the reason I chose this. And then Tree, who are you? What do you do in Star Citizen? Where can they find you?
I am Tree0311. 0311 was my MOS rifleman when I was an infantry marine growing up. And when it comes to Star Citizen, I am one of the co-hosts for the Pathfinders podcast with Nazarus, who is also frequent here on the Captain's Table. And he does his own streaming as well. And I am slowly learning how to stream and edit videos because I want to do similarly to what AttiraKell does. My goal is to do two things. I want to help bring people into the game and have a good new player experience. So that is my goal for streaming, is I want to do the guide type stuff. But because I'm a big supporter of veterans organizations, I want to, if I can get to partner and make some money, I want to do it all for charity, because I have a good job. I make decent money. I want to be able to give back. And that's why I'm wearing this hat. Two reasons. It's a veterans group here in Idaho where I live, and also it's covering the glare from my bald head.
Awesome. And I would highly suggest Pathfinders podcast as well, because if you enjoy long form takes, I believe they Tree and Naz will sit down and talk about like server meshing, but they'll also sit down and talk about just like FPS AI. Like they'll take one specific topic and really do a deep drill down on everything we know about it, and what we can from that, what can we glean in the future. So it's usually 2 hours long. So if you're looking for those, a lot of people listen to the podcast like to listen to at work, where they're like, yeah, I just need something to put it in the background. That's another great kind of podcast to listen to if you like those sort of things.
That's our shtick. Is there's so many things that, if you're ever hang out in the AstroPub or InfoRunners or any one of these, pretty well populated Discords, there's always debates about how this is going to work or what's going on with this. And just what we do is we're like, people are always asking these questions. Okay, we're going to dig through, find all the information, present it to you in an objective manner, and then we make everything into show notes and put it in a Google Doc, so that way if you watch the episode, you can go back and click on that thing and be like, hey, where did they get this information? Oh, it was in this jump point, it was in this Spectrum post, that sort of stuff. Just to make it so that way things aren't as nebulous. That's our word.
I've heard this somewhere at some point and it may have been completely wrong. The lore guy in me knows this because of how many times I've been told stuff like, this is lore, right? It's like, no, it's not. You heard it from the wrong position. All right. Well,
story of our lives.
Let's get started with the topics, as I kind of mentioned. Kel actually, I didn't think I told you this, Kel, but someone reached out to me and said, get AttiraKell on to talk about Star Citizen. So I was like, sure, I'll get Kel on. And Tree had asked if he could come onto a couple captain's tables, and I'm like, who better to do this than to bring Kel on, who's a veteran and he talks about his experience in the military, than Tree, who has yelled at me many times for suggesting the wrong type of ship for a Ro-Ro ferry to be in fact an assault carrier. So
there are some hills worth dying on.
And convinced me, I should say that. So we'll begin with the major topic, which is this is something that gets brought up every so often. Both of you in the military, and I'm sure there are people who are watching both on Twitch and on YouTube after the fact who are military. How much of Star Citizen do you think should be taking cues from the military, be it, the US military, the UK military, German military, because of, all of these different, or even Canadian military, because of all of these different offices all over the world. How much would you like to see in terms of like the sim aspect mirror what you've experienced in the military? Let's start with you, Tree, since you're the last one who introduced yourself.
Okay. When it comes to logistics, the CIG has a pretty difficult line to walk when it comes to realism and sim, because they're making this game that they want to appeal to a wide variety of people. And so they do want it to, appeal to people who are into sim, your Arma, an Arma is, for some people is almost light sim compared to, some of those really niche things out there. And so they want it to appeal to some people, but they also don't want to discourage others who are looking for a more casual experience. And I think the way that they're setting it up, or the way that it seems like they're setting it up with, being able to have a lot of, Othmians in chat, and we talk about this a lot, but having player agency. Whereas, if you don't want to deal with the logistics of ballistics, don't run ballistics. If you don't want to deal with the logistics of going on this long range expedition deep into the system that's 200 AU across, that's 3 jumps away, then don't do that. You can hang out in the Stanton system or any other system that's 5 AU across and have tons of fun in your light fighter or your small ship and not have to deal with logistics. But for those of us who are interested in those things, whether it's exploration, or the military and the logistical aspects, the planning of it, I think they are just getting started with what that entails with physicalized components, having to fill out the inventory of your ship, with medical supplies, ammunition, repair type stuff, all those sorts of things, without going too nitty gritty into the details. I don't think we're going to need, spare components to repair your assault rifle. I don't think you're going to be like, oh gosh, I need a new firing pin because mine melted, that sort of thing. But I think that they're doing a good job of balancing that without going too far. And the other thing that sort of ties into that is it's important for people to realize that these things aren't, that they are things that are embraced in the military, because we have to, worry about global logistics or long range logistics. But in Star Citizen, you have interplanetary, intersystem corporations and organizations that are going to have to learn these lessons too. And so, I think it's a little bit niche, but I think it's a lot of ways that people will embrace it. All the, space truckers. Here you go. Here's a job for you.
So you're saying beyond just the military aspect, and not like even the non-PMC organizations are going to have to learn how to do logistics pretty well.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure.
Attira, anything you want to add? How much sim do you think CIG should be going into when it comes to these things?
So I try to always take a balanced approach when I take on a complex topic like logistics, and I think Tree's right. So one of the things, I mean, to this day, if you play Star Marine, right, and you get in there and there's just a box, and in that box is ammo, right, and then there's another box and it has grenades, right, and so it's just a simple mechanic of having a box, in this case something movable, right, because it would need to be movable in the verse, right, that you could put on the ground, a player could walk up to, interact with it, and then pull out a combat load, right, and then you have the forethought that has to be put in place, like how much like the weapon, the ammunition that you've put in the box or something like that. But just something simple that allows guys that want to engage in a protracted firefight or engagement. It doesn't have to be an overly complex mechanic. It just has to simulate the act of of doing it. Like I think the idea of loading a single round in a magazine at a time, which is something CIG has talked about, is just asinine, absolutely asinine. Look, that is like the least fun job on any range anywhere. And they're like, yeah, let's put that in the game. That'll be cool. People will love to do that. No, they won't.
It's
So,
second least fun job after picking up the brass when you're done.
Absolutely.
If we have to do that.
It's just crazy talk. So, there's definitely a boundary, but I think there has to be some, it's a great first step with the refuel mechanics, right? That's a great first step. I think people still are going to have to get used to planning ahead. And I think pyro is going to be a giant bucket of water on your head when you realize you try and jump across the system and you run out of gas a third of the way across, and or however. So it's logistics. I think it's something that needs to be in the game, but it should not be so complex or burdening that it scares people away, or prevents people from wanting to engage in it.
I was going to
graduated experience. Yeah.
I was gonna add on top of this, because there's two things as well that you brought up that kind of came to my mind. One is, I know CIG, you talked about like the manual loading is kind of asinine, and as even playing something like DayZ, where you have to reload magazines and stuff like that. I don't believe you have to do it one at a time, but the idea of having a magazine that you then reload, with maybe take your box of ammo and drag it across and put it on top of your magazine, and then just it's loaded up. Might make sense. But do you think, like, are you more of a proponent of just saying, hey, buy your magazines of incendiary ammo, of armor piercing ammo, and that kind of stuff, and then just drop the magazines when you're done and just have them disappear, and then you have CIG have you just buy more of them?
Yeah, I mean, because it is a game and it is supposed to be fun. And I think you replicate the reality of logistics by having a player transport new ammunition to you.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, so you're on the attack. You've got a fire team on the attack. You've got a platoon, whatever. And, you have one terrain feature back, some guy with a truck, and we still don't have a good truck in the game.
Are you saying that you're not going to have a guy driving a mole through intense combat zones?
Probably not, but maybe
people are going to try it. I know that Othman's going to do it.
A 5-ton is really kind of just a mole.
Yeah.
I mean, it's fine, right? And so it's one terrain feature back, and you go back and you click on the box, and the box gives you new ammunition. But the idea is that the logistics part of it comes in the planning aspects. So, what guns is everybody going to carry? Because I'm only going to bring in one ammo type, right? And so I'm going to bring in one pistol ammo type. I'm going to bring one rifle ammo in type, and that's going to be the forethought that we put into this. So everybody on my team is going to have one rifle, for this op anyway, because you could switch it up as any way you like. And then that way, at least everybody kind of has a unified purpose, and there's a planning factor there, and you can continue to bring in the same ammunition types and keep the fight going. And the same applies for ships, right? And I think that's going to be a real challenge when everybody has 5,000 different ballistic loadouts, and the Vulcan, right? He's trying to like rearm all this other stuff, and he's only got ammunition for one or two different ballistic weapons. So he can't help you. And it's just, I think that's the complexity. It's not necessarily I want to put a round in the magazine. It's, I want to have the gameplay of a logistician player in his cargo ship or his cargo truck, bringing me things to help me fight.
So what you're saying is you want someone's job to be easier, in the sense that, like, can say, I got to get my 4,000 magazines of P4 ammo. And you also want to make Logi, the head of Logi, whoever organization, rip their hair out and throw things around the room because some guy decided that he was going to bring, or everyone decided they're going to bring a different weapon to the same firefight. And you're sitting there going, I don't have ammo for half of these guns.
Yeah. It makes the players think about how they're going to execute this big attack in a meaningful way. And it also really, as Tree was saying, it encourages the use of energy weapons. But at least for vehicles. But I mean, you still have that concern, that ammunition concern for FPS weapons. So
Mm-hmm. Like it's that's not something I even thought about. You brought that up, and I'm like, that makes sense in modern military standardization is just basically so you can have smoother logistical chains. So if everybody in a platoon has a M4, then they all have an M4. They all have the same ammo type, so it wouldn't be too difficult to get people ammo or spare parts for the weapon. That makes sense.
And that's why
economies of scale.
NATO, everybody uses the 5.56.
Yeah.
So right. So I mean,
you can just drag boxes anywhere, and it works for every weapon they use.
And it works for everyone. Yeah.
The quote is always attributed to Napoleon, but I don't know if he originally said it. But he said, "Amateurs discuss tactics, professionals discuss logistics." Something to the tune of that, and it is absolutely true. And until if you're, when I was a 19, 20-year-old rifleman, I didn't pay too much attention to it just because, ammo and food and everything just always appeared. But once you actually become, a squad leader, section leader, platoon leader, and for me, now working on the aviation side and in medicine, you realize how indispensable logistics is and how you cannot survive, and in reality, for every, that they always say, in the Marines, for every one trigger puller, there's 10 people supporting him, backing him up. And it probably won't be to that, I don't think we'll ever need that scale, especially because a lot of the logistics aspects will be supplied by quanta and quantum.
Mm-hmm.
Quanta within quantum, I think, is going to help soften that balance a lot. But I think the further away you get from the quanta/quantum interactable supply lines, logistical aspects, logistical nodes, the further away you get from those, the more you're going to have to depend on players. And so if you're not wanting to get deep into logistics, it's going to be a lot easier for you to resupply your people in a small to medium size system where there's plenty of quantum or quanta running around. But if you're way out in the deep black, or maybe you're deciding that you want to go into Tiber and do a mission out there, you're on your own. It's all on you. That scale will tip a little bit more on the player dependent aspect of it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there's also the logistics, or the tactics of logistics too. So like, where are you going to put your ammo holding area? Where are you going to put your resupply points? It can't be on an interdictable route. It can't be in an easily locatable place, right? So there's all these things that go into the planning aspects for a large operation, or even a small operation, that allows you to, the logistician and that guy with his ship, some gameplay that supports the fight and is truly meaningful to the guys fighting, in a way that, a bullet in a magazine at a time really isn't meaningful. But your gameplay of continually keeping that flow of resources in. And, a really good example is this: when I was a lieutenant, I was a tank platoon leader. It was 20 years ago. And I pulled up to support a Bradley unit, which is a diesel engine. And I, of course, I'm running a turbine engine in each of my tanks. My fuel consumption rates are incredible, right? It's like 15 gallons of gas or whatever to push the start button, even if the engine doesn't start. And so, the company commander looks at me and he goes, "So you're," I said, "Hey, sir, where's the fueler?" He goes, "Oh, it'll be here in 2 or 3 days." It's like, "Sir, would you like 4 tanks to fight with you tomorrow morning?" He's like, "Yes." I was like, "Well, then I need fuel now, because that's not going to fly in the slightest. Like, I'll be out of gas tonight." And he was like, "Oh, I can't help you with that." So I had to go drive around the battlefield and find a fueler and refuel and drive back to him. And that wasn't an exercise, but I mean, it was just, it was a perfect example of how this dude just, I mean, logistics and burn rates and all these things really give a logistician something to do.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Attira, I got a quick question for you. Have you ever heard of the game Foxhole?
I have heard of this game. Yes, I think a couple of the guys in my my Discord play it.
And for anyone else
Our
in chat,
Discord.
I think if you want to get a good idea of the kind of balance for logistics, how much it'll depend on it, but then how many logisticians you'll sort of need per active combat player. If you go try out Foxhole for a weekend, I think you'll get a really good feel for it. Because I also think that there's the dedicated foxhole players or logisticians within foxhole, the ones who really make the system work, and then you've got your really active combat players. But then there's people who go back and forth and help out. Hey, I just need people to carry things from where I'm dropping them off here up to the front. Versus being the guy who's actually driving the truck or flying the supply ship. Whatever. It's going to take all comers. But if you want to get a good idea of that experience, Foxhole, I think it's a top-down little simple game, but it is so much fun. But it really helps you appreciate those sorts of things, because it does, beans, bullets, band-aids, and fuel. But yeah.
Now, yeah. One of my org mates, he did nothing but drive a truck in that game. He would just drive a cargo truck, and people would block the roads, and he'd be cursing as he would play because he couldn't get supplies forward.
The best audio is when you are in an audio chat with the people and they hear the logisticians just losing their minds because all stupid crunchies.
Yeah. I follow a YouTuber who does Foxhole and does a lot of Arma called Rubrics Raptor. And every so often he'll have videos where his organization, his crew does Arma work, and they have a group of people who just do the logistics. And the way he describes logistics is that they're constantly his team is constantly dumb and getting stuff lost. And every so often he'll call up on the TeamSpeak Discord and be like, "Hey, Logi." And you can hear in the background them just screaming like, no, we're not giving you more tanks. You've lost 4 of them already. They do not grow on trees.
It's like asking your mom for another, can I have a snack? And no, you just had.
How many planes did you crash? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
So.
And I think for a lot of it is you will be able to take care of your own logistical needs for your own small group. It's when you get bigger units going is where that sort of it isn't a linear relationship. It's it's
exponential.
It's an exponential relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And so like for the majority of the time, if you're running around with your group of 4, 5, 6 people, you can carry what you need with you in your multi-crew ship or a couple multi-crew ships, however you're working. But as soon as you start getting into the larger groups where you're essentially an entire server population working together as a team, that's when you really have dedicated logistical needs and dedicated logistical efforts. And that's not going to be all the time. The majority of your average day-to-day gameplay is, for most people isn't going to be that. And so I think that's going to be the bread and butter within the Star Citizen experience.
And that's part of the reason why on the back end of my logistics video, because it's super, super exciting stuff, I lay out like an kind of an old school. It's not, I don't think what we use now, but it was just like the 5-step planning process for logistics, because people need to understand, just give yourself a framework for how to kind of plan this out for the few times you have to do it, so that by the time you have to do it, it's, it's not, you're not just lost in the sauce on what to think about, and then, you can pull it off. So,
yeah. Okay. I tend to agree, and I tend to agree. Like I tend to look at the logistics because y'all know I do a lot of lore stuff, and so I look at the lore and the size of something like frickin' Stanton versus Pyro versus something like Keel, which are just these massive systems in comparison. And I realized just how many people don't understand that there won't be even respawn points nearby. Like Pyro will have 1 station, and we don't even know if the other stations that exist will have dedicated medical facilities. You may be stuck where there is 1 place you can respawn, and you better hope Xenothreat likes you, because you're going out that airlock if you show up in their imprint. So the logistics is one of those things where people need to start, or not necessarily logistics, just simple planning, just knowing where you're going, what you're doing, typical rules when you're going out on a trip or going out on a camping trip is like, hey, this is where I'm going, this is what I'm bringing with me, this is what I'm coming back. Call the Rangers if I don't come back, kind of thing. If I'm not back by this time, send someone to looking for me. So just for your own experience. So.
And to point to your line of 5 video, I think that's part of the reason that CIG is doing, the line of 5 and the systems around it where they picked is because of the sizes of those systems. They're working our way, or they're working us up to the larger systems. With the line of 5, you've got a good, you've got good starter systems. Pyro, everybody's like, oh my gosh, Pyro's huge. And Pyro is hard mode, and it's really your introduction to hard mode, because Null is hard mode. Null is Pyro, but 10 times larger. 120 AU, and so they're going to slowly ease us into the cold water of this pool. First you got to get your nether regions, and then your belly button, and then your armpits. One little bit at a time. But they're not just going to shock the system with the massive system with no infrastructure, nothing but pirates all trying to kill you. We're going to work our way up to that, and the player base will slowly adjust.
Yeah,
we hope.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll adjust with much screeching and gnashing of teeth.
What do you mean I have to refuel?
I mean, well, that brings me to another topic, because this is something that I mentioned when I came up with that, when I came to that realization, when the Info Runners, we did that video about just the size and scale of systems. I kind of talked about how there needs to be a Ro-Ro ferry, something to the effect of, hey, you can take your light fighters and put it on this ship, and that ship is not a carrier. It's like a combat carrier. It's like a vehicle carrier that you can just use it to get into areas where your ship would not normally be able to go to. And then they introduced the Liberator, and then they didn't do the one thing that they needed to do, which was add beds to a long range ship. But that is an example of CIG kind of realizing that they have this problem, where like going forward, players are going to start to realize that there is not a lot of infrastructure in a lot of these places, and they need, because of the nature of these small fighters being not a lot of fuel, they need to have some way for the average player to be able to transport their ships without having to buy a Kraken. So
Sure.
Are there any other ships like that, vehicles or ships that CIG doesn't seem to have realized they need to build yet, or things that there's holes?
Oh God, so many.
Let's start one at a time with Kel. Kel, give me one, and then Trey, and then we'll bounce back and forth and see how many. What's the first one pops on your head?
I'm going to play off the Liberator piece. So the Liberator is basically Army watercraft. Okay, it's going to carry like, it's because they've already said, right, John Crew and everybody, they already said our ships are always bigger than what we have in real life. So like, a Saber is much larger than an F-15, right? But it's still, a one-man craft. So the Liberator is basically an Army watercraft. It can take a vehicle or two, and they've upscaled it, but it's not really a car carrier. It's not I would argue it's not really a long haul car carrier type of ship. Now, I want to say there was some piece of lore about like Crusader having
the Jupiter.
Yeah, that. And then they militarized it, right? So they have this huge
chat.
Yeah, they have this huge ship. Now that is a car carrier, a long haul freight car carrier. You could probably build that out as something that has like a Port Olisar style bedroom, right? For one for every ship, and then you could line your ships up, and then that guy with his massive car carrier super tanker sized vessel could then take you across however many systems you need to go to this new place. But that's like, I mean, obviously that has to be balanced really carefully, because even the civilian version of that ship is a capital ship. Even the civilian version of that ship is enormous and probably powerful, and the military version is probably very close to gosh, I don't even know how you would scale the DPS output of a ship that large that's carrying 30-40 players worth of stuff, but it'd be a lot. So it's something that have to be balanced. But yeah, so an actual like row that can carry that, like a brigade combat power rate worth of stuff, right? 5,000 soldiers worth of stuff sits on a row.
Yeah.
Right. And I think there's 5 of those afloat in the world. There may be more or less, depends on if they're important, they've docked and you're using it. But, that's a brigade combat team's worth of equipment in that ship. That's a big ship.
Mm-hmm.
And it's packed to the gills. So it's just, that's something we're definitely missing as a good logistical move from point A to point B ship.
Yeah, I always say that because it's you need something that's not necessarily bristling with guns, but has a machinist area, like a machinist room where they can just go repair things or fix components. You need a medical bay. You need a place where people can sleep. You need a place where you can just stick all the weapons that you're going to need, let alone the food and maintenance, be able to maintain vehicles that you need to use. Because something like that wouldn't just be used for military. You could use it for mining expeditions, for exploration, for settling. If you want to set up a base somewhere, you need a ship like that to be able to get you and all of the stuff you need to build a base to a location beyond just the Pioneer. So,
yeah.
Tree, you're one thing that's a gap in CIG's current designs for ships or vehicles.
I think the gap is that they're just starting to really get into that. I think they're maybe like a little bit behind the power curve as far as developing. And we know that they've got a bunch of things concepted that we haven't seen yet. So maybe they have these things concepted and they just haven't gone into production yet. And so maybe they are considering it. But as it stands right now, how we've got the small mining ship, we've got a medium mining ship, we've got a capital sized mining ship that we don't have yet. And I think we're going to have much the same thing for just about every sort of profession. The capital mining ship is a refinery also. But we've got the Cutlass Red Ambulance, we've got an Apollo Medevac, we've got the Hope class Endeavor. I think we're going to see continue on with repair. We're going to see these things in sort of like fours. And maybe filling out the roles, with more examples of sort of the same thing, but different manufacturers' take on it. But I imagine we're going to see much the same when it comes to logistics and again, this is a thing where it doesn't have to be necessarily military, but it would make sense that the larger aspects of it would be you would see player and non-player organizations using surplus of this or that in order to accomplish this goal, just because of the initial cost of developing and building these larger ships. But for the smaller ones, I wouldn't be surprised if you go back and look at the Valkyrie. In the Valkyrie Q&A, they talked about how they have variants that they'd like to do and that they talked about, but they aren't in production yet. And it was in a question asking about, I think it was like a medevac Valkyrie, which I think would be great. And
yeah, that would be.
Yeah, the Valkyrie is with the way that we know that they build ships, partly for damage purposes as well, is that the ship is broken up into a whole bunch of pieces that are not small pieces like Lego, but each like this part of the hull is a chunk and attached to this part of the hull, that sort of thing. I think a Valkyrie, using the Valkyrie as the sort of next variant platform in order to do these logistical things would be really great, just because so much of logistics will be moving things across space, but then down to the planet side. It isn't just going to be supporting ships. It's going to be, like you talked about, the mining operation, anything else that you're going to be doing on the ground, whether it's a mining operation or building up a base, a logistics base, being able to take what you need down to the planet or pick it up on the planet and bring it back up to space and take it where you need to go. I think the Valkyrie with VTOLs, because we know that they are planning on making the what's the term for the thruster efficiency curves. I think the thruster efficiency curves are really where that's going to play in a lot more than people realize. And being able to get up and down just like, with water-based navies, going from ship to shore and back again is where the Valkyrie will really stand out, or vehicles or ships like the Valkyrie. And that would be sort of like your medium size logistical ship, whether it's all cargo or having either all cargo or having I think it's like the LAATC from Star Wars, the Clone Wars, where it's able to hold a single heavy vehicle. Because the smaller Valkyrie, it can hold, a couple small vehicles up to an Ursa. If you've got one that can hold a single large vehicle, whether it's a combat vehicle or, logistics style vehicle, give us an Atlas with a crane and a big old tractor trailer bed or something like that. Those sorts of being able to support the ground vehicles below it on the logistical aspects, but also being able to coordinate with the next vehicle up, or somewhere along that lines, I think would be a really great way to fill that gap with assets that they already sort of have.
Okay.
And before I end that, so we always, like, people think that the Liberator is like, oh yeah, that's an LCAC. Well, an LCAC is launched from a larger ship. It's a ship to shore vehicle. It would, the Liberator, if you look it up, looks exactly like a concept ship with the U.S. Navy and the UE, call it UE Marines, with the U.S. Marines, called a light amphibious warship. And the way the light amphibious warship works fits exactly with how the that first paragraph in the Liberator's comlink talks about how it applies the same traditions of large scale military and troop transport, long distance to a smaller scale. Well, the light amphibious warship is meant to be able to do many of the same things that a LPD or an LHD or an LHA does, but on a much smaller scale. So it's still a seagoing vessel. It can still go a long ways. It's just meant to go all the way from your port in San Diego to island hopping operations in the Pacific. That's why it was built. That's exactly what the Liberator is for. But in the context of SC, those shorter distances, you don't really need as much bed support, as long as the bed support is where you're picking up from and there's more where you're going. Congratulations, you're going to be sleeping on a cot in the woods in Microtech.
Yeah.
Until you get into the, hey, you're going to need to go multiple jumps and you're going to need to be staged out in space for days, however long at a time. You don't need the bed support for the troops that you're carrying. That's that next level beyond the Liberator. The Liberator is a very capable ship, and I really like it. I bought one, but it isn't like you said, Paul. It isn't that full service thing. And that's where you get up into that LPD level, and the LPD, I think, is that lowest level that would be like player ownable, purchasable, if they can appropriately scale it to do all the things like you mentioned.
Kel, you said you had another one in mind.
Oh, so many. But I want to follow up, if you don't mind, with,
Sure.
I've been kind of watching the chat going, and they're like, do you ever think we're going to have to move a BCT? No, not necessarily. I'm not applying the Jupiter as a tactical troop carrier or anything like that. I'm applying it as, let's say an organization wants to move from point A to point B, and that organization is TEST or the Explorers or any of these other large groups. You can load up, right, a bunch of their stuff and take it, right, from point A to point B, right, for minimal cost or whatever. And it's not for brigade op. I'm not saying this is specifically for brigade operations. This is a transport vessel that I think would hit the mark of, I think, what a lot of people think of as carrier, but I don't think it should be set up as a necessarily like the Pegasus, like this tactical carrier business. It's a transportation device, right? A RoRo doesn't pull into a contested port.
No.
Right?
It's after the beachhead has been secured and
yeah. What do you do? Right? Was it? Oh gosh, I can't remember who the the 4-star was, I can't remember his name, but he asked this question in legislation. He goes, what do we do when a Ro-Ro hits the ocean floor and you lose several $1 million, hundreds of $1 millions in Army equipment, right? It's not a tactical piece of equipment. It moves things, right? It moves a lot of stuff.
There's a whole lot of those from World War II at the bottom of the Atlantic.
Yeah. So if I had another, and just talking about ground B, I'll switch from, my first one was kind of a space thing, moving from stuff from point A to point B. I'll say ground. I really would love to see CIG introduce stuff based on, let's say, the rover or a rover-sized platform over the Atlas. So
you're talking about the Ursa rover?
Yeah, the Ursa rover,
Okay.
or something smaller. So when the what's it called? The new AAA platform. It's the Centurion.
Yeah.
So fantastic, love it, amazing. I was very excited that they brought something that has a level of endurance to the anti-aircraft, ground anti-aircraft fight. That was really good. It still can only be moved by one ship in the verse right now, right? And I was, I was like, oh man, I scale it all down to one, right? And so instead of a turret of 4 size 4s, give me 4 size 3s on a smaller platform that's based around fitting into a Connie.
What I'm hearing is you want to combat mule. You want the mule steel where they stick 2 size 2s in the back.
maybe not the mule platform, but something that every player, that if I don't have $1,000 in the game and one of those, part of that money is associated with a C2, M2, A2, right? I can still pick this thing up and move it to a place and play with it, right? Because if you buy an Atlas-based platform vehicle and you don't have a C2, A2, you're either relying on the good graces of someone on the server to move it, or you have an org mate that happens to be on with you that can help you move it. And I just think they ought to take a look at maybe a different platform for their next line of ground vehicles that is based around, let's say, a Connie, right? If it can fit in a Connie, then we can have something that a lot of players can purchase and play with and move about the verse.
Yeah, even if it's not on the Ursa rover platform, maybe something that's as modular or
about that size,
about that size.
That's the size, right? Especially is, I think, important. It doesn't have to, just like the mule doesn't have to have an interior. We don't have to be able to get up and walk around it. You don't have to be able to look around and get your water bottle out of the cup holder. It's okay, CIG. You can relax.
just let me sit in the chair and drive the vehicle. It's perfectly fine.
So when you talked about the logistics and moving a brigade combat team, it made me think of something. Logistics isn't just going to be you supporting your own players. This is something that I fully expect is, not, when people think private military organizations, they always think about your Blackwater, sneaky squirrel, full beard, kitted out guys, doing security duty. They don't think about the majority of private military corporations and organizations are based around logistics. And I fully expect, take it for what it is, but I fully expect the UEE to, at least in part, privatize some of the logistical aspects of, moving their stuff around. Paul, what do they call it with the Hercules? The
Sword of Hope?
the command that manages.
Starlift Command.
Yeah, Starlift Command. Well, Starlift Command, can only be, in so many places at once. They are going to have limitations. There's no reason that Starlift Command isn't going to contract out you with whatever ship to move, UEE Army, UE Marine assets, whether it's supplies or vehicles. We always think of everything having to do with moving crates in containers. I wouldn't be surprised if we end up having to, hey, the Army base over at, whatever planet needs you to move, tanks or vehicles or, crates of guns or something like that here. And you have to have a certain amount of rep in order to get that mission. But that's logistics, and you are performing a logistical task You're not just moving, cereal from Bremen Mills to Terra.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes you're moving a tank and and all its operators from one place to another just because they need to move that thing to somewhere.
Or for the
location.
UEE, if it's an NPC based mission, it could just be moving the tank. It may not be moving the operators. So
moving it from one base to another, it kind of like it
just-
isn't a military train
Yeah.
that moves all the Abrams tanks from one army base to another, to go to NCTC in Southern California.
Yeah.
That's a civilian owned train.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to ask this question because this has come up a lot, and I want both of y'all to answer this if you can at some point. Do we need an IFV or an APC in Star Citizen? For those of you who don't know what an IFV is, it's an infantry fighting vehicle. It's kind of a cross between like a tank and an APC. It can hold some people, but it's mostly designed to support infantry units. The Bradley is a good example. It's the BMP. There's a Russian version of that.
BMP. Yeah.
So, and there are multiple APCs. I think the Striker is technically an AP or an IFV.
Depends on the version, but yeah, it has an APC variant. Yeah.
So and an APC is just an armored personnel carrier where you take people, throw them into a metal box, and you send them off to the front.
Sure.
So do you think we need either of those in Star Citizen? Kel, I'll start with you.
Okay. Short answer, yes. Long answer, hell yes. So, I mean, the APC is an interesting thing. I mean, for years we used to joke in our org that the Ursa rover was an APC, and one of our guys would just freak out and he'd be like, "No, it's not," and it's not, right? So, and the APC version of the Spartan, yeah. I mean, it's it carries 6 guys. Come on, man. Come on. I can shove 8 guys in a much smaller platform in real life, and I understand we have physics and you can't lay people down on top of somebody's lap and just pile guys in. So I understand that, but I think that if they're gonna bring in weather the way they've said, where it's gonna hinder flight and it's gonna make us have to drive to an objective area, then the same is gonna apply if you want to. If you're going to want to engage in inter-org PvP and you want to attack somebody's base, right? You wait for a weather front to roll in. It grounds all of their aircraft. It grounds all of your aircraft, but you don't care because you're planned for it. You got a crap ton of APCs to move your guys in, and it works out, and you can overwhelm them, right? So that's a perfect, light case study of using an APC for IFVs. I mean, yeah, I mean, it is not like a tank, but everybody thinks it's a tank. It's a much smaller weapon system than a tank, right? So, but I think there is value add in the idea of putting a size 5 repeater on a ground vehicle and just, but it's just a single size 5 repeater and letting it go ham, right? And then also giving you 6 or 7 seats in the back. The challenge is those are and the problem is those are pretty big vehicles. So I mean, you're going to run into the same issues that I just argued against, which is that you're not going to put that on probably a rover platform.
No,
but I think there's value in the verse for the diversity of ground equipment. We have a huge diversity of space ships, and they continue to expand that diversity and make it more and more interesting. But I don't know that they've put a huge amount of thought towards ground centric combat and the reason we have things. So I think it would be smaller than a tonk, though. Tonks are enormous.
Yeah.
Maybe too large. And I think there's room too. I know, Tree, you were saying you love the idea of tracks. I think I definitely want more tracked vehicles, but I also want something that hovers. I think they're not giving us enough military GN crossover hover stuff, right? I think that would be pretty cool too. So like a GN light tank, right? Or a
very
GN
fit with it.
IFV, right?
Yeah.
And you get to hover over rocks and stuff and blast around at 1,000,000 miles an hour and avoid rocks. I think it'd be awesome.
That's very Xi'an, and as well, the idea of being speed is your best defense. Be able to move around people and not have to deal with them up front, that kind of stuff. Whereas like the UEE is very much more armor the better. Just give me more.
Yeah.
So, Tree, your thoughts? Do we need an IFV or an APC?
I definitely like the idea of both. I don't think that the Atlas chassis is a great use for one of those, just because it sits so high. It sits up high as if you're driving on axles, like a in the Marine Corps we have 7 tons, and I always forget what the Army's version is, but where you're riding on an axle. Versus if you look at the things, there are infantry fighting vehicles that aren't axle based.
Or torsion bar based. Yeah.
Torsion bar based, just like the old Humvees, where you're not sitting way up high on top of an axle. You could bring it down, and I think that they could do it so that way the vehicle is shorter, and your infantry types are sitting more between the wheels, kind of like how, because that's really how the Ursa is. The Ursa is torsion based; it isn't axle based. And I think if they went that way for something similar to something similar to a Striker versus a truck chassis, I think that would be great. The same thing with tracks. You could, if you have tracks sitting on the outside, you can have a much lower much lower to the ground. You still want some ground clearance, but you're not having to, walk up a ramp or, climb up a ladder in order to get to the troop compartment. And I think that would make it fit better in other vehicles. You could have it shorter but wider. But I would, I would really like to. I like driving the Tonk. I think they did a whole video about what they did for researching on how that should feel when they're driving it. And I think it I've never driven a tank, so I'm sorry, Kel, if it's totally off base, but it feels fun to me. I enjoy it. It's an enjoyable experience. And I think that would be, if they could have, a Bradley type vehicle where, you can have it lower to the ground, kind of like a Rover, bigger, but it doesn't have to be as long as a Nova tank. It doesn't have to be as long as an Atlas chassis. You just have 2 people in the front, a driver, and then a remote turret operator who does the coax and whatever the in-game equivalent would be of like a 20 to 30 mic gun, because that's what's on a Bradley, that's what's on an LAV that we use in the Marine Corps. The LAV is a great platform. And then you just have, just like the Ursa Rover, 4 people in the back, a fire team. That's great. Whether you could fit it in I think you could probably make it so you could fit it in a Valkyrie. It would give the Valkyrie, or something similar, that much more capability. It isn't quite Tonk, but it's a bit closer than an Ursa. But I think that would give us, more variety and more capability. And I don't know what to expect as far as survivability from the Ballista Atlas, platform, as far as, because we don't know how armor is going to play into that. And I would hope that an infantry fighting vehicle or an APC would have more armor than something that is built off of a truck and an axle chassis, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And before anyone, I can even hear people in the chat or in the comments like, well, but then that would invalidate the Spartan. And the answer is no, not really, because the Spartan could be cheaper to produce. Like an IFV is going to cost a lot more money to produce than something you just basically a box you slap on the back of a flatbed truck. It's going to be very different.
Yeah. So 113.
Yeah,
you could put 6, 7, 8 dudes in a 113 and M113, and it is a box on tracks, right? And it's maybe has a size 1 equivalent, right? An M240 Bravo or a 50 cal on top. That's a lot cheaper to produce than a Striker combat vehicle. So it's also probably going to die a lot faster if it gets caught in the open. So
Yeah.
Well, and
And
the
that
the,
would
the
be
balance is how much does it cost to buy, but also how much does it cost to maintain and
Mhm.
Yep.
support. Your logistical limitations, and repair limitations for something that's the equivalent of a LAV or a Striker or a Bradley is going to be more than
Oh
your
yeah.
um, your Spartan, because your
Mhm.
Spartan's a truck chassis. It's a
Yeah.
truck with armor on it. When I rode around as a young infantryman in Iraq in the back of a 7-ton truck, we had giant armored plates all over that dang thing. And that's about what a Spartan is, because we even had a turret on it.
Mhm.
It's just a futuristic version of that. But those things, drive for days and they go faster. And they have all those wheels. They're really, really rugged, but they're also a lot cheaper to maintain and a lot cheaper to operate. And you get better fuel economy than an LAV or a Bradley, like
Yeah.
Kel was talking about.
And we come back to
That's
the logistics question as well, is that, it's the same chassis as the Ballista and the Centurion. So if you're already using Ballistas and Centurions, you can just swap parts out pretty easily. And I don't imagine it's
Yeah,
going
that
to be
makes sense.
presupposing that you can move stuff in.
Yeah.
You can get those vehicles where you're going, which is
Yeah.
the problem with those vehicles anyway.
Yeah.
But you're right, interoperability would be really good. So and I will say one thing. You said you've never driven a tank tree. The Tonk drives like an M1 on ice, right?
I
So
wonder
like
if
they
that will be affected by the vehicle physics, or if is that only wheeled?
I don't know, but I really hope so. One, they need to slow it down. It
Mhm.
it goes way too fast. And I know we're 900 years in the future and tank go fast and it's fun. But it moves really quick for its size. I mean, this thing's huge vehicle.
I've seen you guys move real fast in an M1 and come to a
But it's
stop
about
real quick, and I
but
was
it's like
impressed.
about 40, 45 miles an hour, which to a dismount seems really fast. But when a Humvee goes burning by at 60 miles an hour, it doesn't feel quite as fast, right?
The death
And
rattle.
yeah, and then of course an M1 can go 70 miles an hour, but you run a
Mother of
very
God.
you run a very high risk of blowing the pack. And my wingman in Iraq in 2003 did exactly that. The governor stopped working on his tank and he was like, wow, this is amazing. I can go 70. He started chasing down cars and like having a great time. And then his pack exploded and
Pull
he was in
over.
he was in a Humvee for like the next 6 months because his tank was just destroyed. Meanwhile, me back with my 45-mile-an-hour M1 was still running because I didn't explode my engine. So, but yeah, those tracks need to grip the ground a lot harder. They need to, when you turn, it turns. It doesn't slide unless it's on ice.
Oh yeah.
And and it will rip apart the ground, road, concrete, anything that gets in its way. And I think that that's something that they've kind of missed on, like the balance of weight and how much pressure is on the ground and how quickly it will turn. So maybe physics update will fix that. I hope so.
I'm
So
hoping it applies to everything, because that's kind of what they were demonstrating I think it was in ISC, is how it was less slidey, I guess. And I'm
yeah, I mean,
hoping
it
that
shouldn't be
we
slidey
get
at
that
all
experience.
unless you're on a lake on Microtech,
Yeah.
right? And then the other thing
I've seen you in an M1 power slide and drift around a corner in Najaf, and
oh gosh, I wonder if he had any rubber left on his pads or if he was just on steel.
he was going very fast, and it was a fire mission for another part of my company, and he power slid towards the building I was in. And had I not been so dehydrated, I would have peed myself. But yeah,
Oh
it can
gosh.
happen.
Okay. I will say the other thing they need to do in the main gun on the tank, you can't magnify,
Mhm.
Oh,
and that's
yeah.
a problem. Like I should have, I mean, the old version, because I'm an old geriatric man. We had a 3 power and a 10 power, right? But now the M1A2 SEP V3 has up to 25 power magnification, which is huge. Now, I don't know that you can shoot super accurate on that, but you can conduct reconnaissance with that out to a very, very long way because you can see forever. So there's definitely some room there. And then I'll just throw it out there because everybody wants to hear it. Thermals,
Yeah.
FLIR
Mhm.
imagery, something
Okay.
to let us see what the hell's going on at night. Because holy hell, yeah.
I've always been a proponent against thermals and night vision, but only because I feel like you need to have active counters, because in a game you need to have something that can actually counter someone's ability to use those tools. So you're not just like the person with thermals is always going to win because they're going to know exactly where you are. Because on a planet like, you know, or a moon like Yella, you're going to be the hottest thing in the entire planet. Like nothing's going to even get close to the heat of a person in a spacesuit on the
Sure, but
sub-zero temperatures.
You could have armor that kind of locks that in and
Yeah.
acts as a diffuser. I think it should be very hard to mask the thermal signature of a vehicle.
Yeah.
Right. And that's really what it's for. But you could even decide not to go thermal, and you could just go uh, IR, right?
Mhm.
Infrared, which is, a nice green haze over everything, but you can actually see,
Yeah.
right? And infantry lying down in IR is really hard to pick out. A vehicle that's stationary and has some cover behind it, or some concealment, is hard to pick out, right? But you can still see that you're about to drive off a damn cliff,
Yeah.
Mhm.
and that would be nice, or you're about to slam into a rock. Because right now, when you're on the dark side doing some type of activity, you just can't see a thing.
Mhm.
You turn on the lights and you can see like 5 feet in front of your vehicle.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, no, I think there's, but I was going to say is like I think there definitely can be counters to that. It's a game. You could invent. It's
Sure,
900 years in the future. You could
Absolutely.
have a specific type of armor that'll diffuse the light or diffuse the heat from you, so it's much harder to see. So you show up as like as the same as the background, but you're moving, so you can still see it. But it's not just an automatically I win. So, but yeah,
Absolutely.
At least night vision. I think the harder part would be balancing the thermal for sure. Just because then you're that does it just like in real life with all of us flying with thermals and shooting with thermals. If they don't have it at night, it definitely is an I win.
Mhm.
So
yeah.
it unless it's for every ship with every HUD and every vehicle with every HUD, unless everyone has it, no one can have it. But
Yeah.
I think everyone should have night vision. If you have a combat helmet on, you have night vision. If you are in a ship, you have night vision, or a vehicle, you have night vision. But the thermal would be harder to balance for sure, because
Yeah.
the only thing I could think of is if everyone has it, and thermals are kind of based off of detection range, just like they kind of are working on the balance for that for your radar and heat signature, your detectability as far as that goes, out to a certain distance, that little, you become more, a much softer glow, much, at a certain distance, you
Sure,
get more
yeah.
and more difficult to pick up visually,
Mhm.
versus just absolute spotlight that you would see of a white hot diesel engine or a jet engine flying through the air on a helicopter or something.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think that's most of the questions. It's already been an hour, which I know
Oh my
always
gosh.
people
Wow.
forget about that when you get to talking and stuff like this. We'll move on to the questions and answers session, but I feel like this is a good kind of perspective. Make sure you're checking out Kell. It's youtube.com/ATTIRAKELL, all one word, right?
Yep, that's it.
And then check out Pathfinders podcast on Twitch /Nazarus_YT, and on YouTube, youtube.com/Nazarus.
Give me a follow on Twitch. I haven't got into streaming yet. I'm just finishing putting all my tech stuff together so I can do the two system like you talked about, Paul.
Yeah.
But if you give me a follow on Twitch, I am going to be streaming more regularly now that I started this new job and I have a lot more time at home. But I will be doing helping people out with the guide system, the new to the verse thing.
Twitch.tv/Tree0311. I'm saying this out loud as well because we'd also do this in a podcast format, so people don't necessarily see all of the stuff. I'll have the links in the description for the videos and other stuff as well. So,
And Paul, can I say one thing real quick?
Go for it.
Yeah. Just my next A Soldier's Opinion. I'm focusing on EW and cyber. So
Okay,
trying to discuss where those fall in the verse and how they're used today and what we could expect.
sweet. And this isn't it for those of you watching on Twitch. We will be moving right over to the question and answer session. So make sure you ask questions if you have questions you want to get answered. And for those of you who are watching this on YouTube or listening to this in the podcast, those will be separate episodes, which will come out a couple days after the episode you're watching right now or listening to right now. So just keep an eye on for those. And I'll try to have a link at the very end where for that episode, because some people seem to be Tree specifically mentioned at one point, it's like, why don't you upload the Q&A sessions? And I'm like, I do. Do people forget that I have the Q&A sessions? So I'll have it right above Kell's head when it is available so after the fact, so you can just click it and just go straight to the next video. And like I say every time, hope to see you someday in the black.